Hey everybody, my name is Shane Hale. Hope y'all doing well. Since we are doing videos for my sports themed group called Crossing Home, quick intro about myself. I'm a former baseball player. Grew up in a map dot town in Mississippi named Lucedale. Played 4 years of baseball in South Alabama. Was a 7th round draft pick in 1990. Spent 7 years with the Orioles in the Orioles organization. My last year being 1996. And 25 years later, here I am. So, what I want to talk about today is pruning, okay? Now, if you're a gardener, you might know what pruning is, where you cut back the old growth to make room for new growth. And I'll tell you a quick story, then we're going to talk about how that relates to sports, and then how that relates to life and to faith and Christianity. So, I've got these plants in my house. They're called peace lilies, and they're like a real tropical green, pretty vibrant plant that does not do well when it freezes. They die, and basically the roots don't die, but all the green stuff above the ground dies, and the plant comes back the next year and it grows new growth. Well, I had several peace lilies I kept for years, and I would bring them inside once the cold weather hit, and then put them back outside when it was warm. If it froze at night, I'd bring them in so they wouldn't die. I live close to the coast, so it doesn't get real cold down here. But each spring, they would kind of tired. They would re-green up, and get new leaves, and it'd be pretty. Well, one year I forgot them outside one cold night, and they froze, and everything that was green died, turned brown, hung over the pot. So I took and cut the dead growth off, threw it in the trash, and next spring that they grew back like always. But here's the thing. They grew back prettier than ever, greener than ever, bigger than ever that I'd ever had in those 3 years that I'd had those plants. It was because I pruned them. I cut off all the dead growth. I cut off all the growth, cut it down to the dirt. They just sprung back up. And so every year since then, I don't bring them inside. I leave them outside the wintertime. I let them freeze, let them die, and I prune them. And each year they come back as pretty as ever, okay? But here's a few things about that pruning that I do. When I cut those dead, ugly, nasty branches off, okay, I don't leave those around the plant. I throw them in the garbage. I'm done with them. I take and dig around the top of the plant where the dirt is and get out any seeds that might have fallen in there. Anything that might grow that's not that plant, like baby oak trees or grass roots or just whatever. I don't want it to inhibit the new growth of the plant. I want the plant to come back without any competition, okay? So then I take and add some more dirt to the top, get some fresh topsoil, and put across the top of it. And I put them back out in the sunshine, and they come back as pretty as ever. But me being the gardener, I tend those plants. I take care of them. I make sure they have water. I make sure they have sunlight. I pull the weeds out. And that's kind of the same way God works in our life. He prunes us back from time to time. And by pruning us, we learn more about faith, more about life, more about ourselves, what we're made of, what's inside of us. It's easy to go through life and things are going well. But it's when we get knocked down, have an injury in sports, have a crisis in life, that we find out what's inside of us. Okay, we get pruned back. Now, that's kind of how it relates to plants. Now, one thing I want to mention about the plants is, back to plants real quick, is when I cut that old growth off, the old nasty dead parts, I throw them away. I don't put them around the plant to remind them what they've done, the bad days. I've wiped that off, just like God wipes off and forgets about it. Okay, let's talk about how in sports. Okay, in sports, my second year of pro ball, I got drafted in 1990, 7th round. Went off and had my first season, did really well. Got moved up the next year, hit the ground running, was doing really well again, and on my way to getting called to Double A. I threw real hard, did pretty good stuff, and I was heading to the big leagues, given time. And I blew my elbow out, and I spent the next 2 years in the DL disabled list with arm surgery and rehabbing an elbow. So from a sports perspective, I got pruned. And what did I find out in those 2 years? Well, I found that I could work harder than I thought I could work to get my career back. I found I was more appreciative of my career once I got it back, because I'd lost it. I didn't know if I'd play again or not. It wasn't the last injury I had. I had a couple of more, another arm surgery later on. But I got pruned a lot in sports, okay? It could be as much as having a bad outing. You go out and get roughed up for a couple of games, have a couple of bad games, a couple of bad stretches, where it could be something as devastating as surgery where you don't know if you'll come back or not. Prunings come in all shapes and sizes. Okay, and during that time, from a sports perspective, I learned a lot about myself. I learned the harder it could work, as I already mentioned. But I learned how setbacks come along and things happen. And a lot of times those things happen, you find yourself in a better position when it's over with, just like those plants that I just talked about, because you've had a new perspective, you've had the dead stuff pulled away, you've had a chance to grow through something, a chance to become something, a chance to appreciate things more. Okay, now let's talk about how that works with faith. How does that work as a Christian? Well, getting pruned is not a punishment. Getting pruned is a reward. Okay. Now I mentioned some plants I had, but on different kind of plants, like let's say maybe something that produces fruit. The Bible talks about producing fruit. Oftentimes, the fruit that you produce for the kingdom. And when a fruit producing plant produces each year, they have to be pruned. If you don't prune those plants back, they won't produce the same amount of fruit. Okay, that's just how those kind of fruit bearing plants work. But when you prune them, and the gardener prunes them properly, as in knowing when to prune them, how to prune them, how far to prune them back, what time of year to prune them, then their yield expands. And those fruit trees give off more fruit every year, okay, because of that pruning. So it's not a punishment to that tree, it's a reward. And that's the same way it works with us from a faith-based perspective, from a Christian perspective. God prunes us in our life. He sends us here loaded, man. We show up here absolutely loaded, okay? I write, I do videos, and they're not great moving works of art, but I didn't do that before I let Christ in my life. I didn't do those things before I reached the end of myself at 45 years old and said, God, I can't do this. And if you'll just pick me up and fulfill me and give me some joy and make me whole, give me a purpose in life, I'll follow you and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he did. That's where the writing came from. But as Christians, he prunes us just like I prune those plants. He prunes us because he loves us, not to punish us, because he wants to bring out of us what he's put inside of us. And it takes pruning, okay? So we can learn, so we can grow, so we can see him work in our life, so we can see him meet our needs, so we can see him clear a path for us, protect us, promote us. And part of that's going to be pruning. We get knocked down a little bit. And that's how he helps us become who we are in Christ, okay? So to recap real quick, just as I take those plants, those simple plants in those pots outside my house, I pruned them today. Cut the dead stuff off, I threw it in the garbage. I put new topsoil on. I got the old weeds and stuff out. They're ready for a whole new season. Same thing can happen in sports. Sometimes our careers end before we want them to. Maybe they end in high school, maybe they end in college, maybe they end in pro ball. But things can happen along the way to prune us back in sports as well. And from a faith-based perspective and in life, we get pruned there as well. But that's how God brings out what's in us, okay? It's not a punishment, it's a reward, because there's fruit inside of you, and God wants you to help you bring it out for his kingdom, for his glory. I'm going to stop talking now before I start talking in circles and become redundant. I hope that made some sense. If you've been tuning in to the Crossing Home videos, please keep tuning in. There'll be a new one each week from a different person. You might see my face again at some point, but invite a friend and pass the word and let God into your life and watch what he can do in your life when you give it to him. You'll have a good rest of the day.